Here with Nance. How you doing today, Nance?
I'm doing great. I didn't get much sleep, but I don't always. I tend to not get much sleep in general. But I'm doing well, thank you. Apparently, Donald Trump won last night. Is that what happened?
Well, the problem with these interviews is that they don't always come out
Yeah, yeah.
chronologically. So when people hear this, they might think, "Oh, seriously, this is old news. We want current events." But that's not my style. I don't if I wanted to kind of cling to the feed and feed the feed and continuously regurgitate whatever the take of the moment is, then I'd probably be more successful, but also I'd be less interested. And I like to think that if I'm doing something, and I think this is just kind of a general philosophy of life, if you're doing something, um, where's it at on the gravestone meter? Is it like,
Mm, mm.
if any particular moment of your life was turned into a snapshot or a sentence and printed on your gravestone, how would you feel about that? There's some people I think who have kind of a comedic jester view of life where, oh, the more absurd the better, the more ironic and kind of humorous or contradictory, the better it is. uh, I guess maybe I have a more tragic view of life where we're never going to get to that perfect gravestone poem or whatever
Mm.
that is, but there's something romantic about striving for that. And so that kind of influences the way that there's probably a way where that becomes a chokehold on life, and then it's paralyzing, you're not able to do anything. Um, but yeah, I guess that's my excuse. That's my apology to the viewers because I have way too much scheduled. So for me to publish this when it's recorded, this is not a live stream. Full disclaimer. So unfortunately, by the time people hear this, all of our election takes will be old and moldy and stinky, and no one will want to hear them anymore. But I'm sure there's a lot of other things we can talk about. One of the things I guess I want to understand and hear from you is um, things that I don't get theory underground. I don't get what's going on. I've To me, it's like when you're sleep deprived and you're driving down a dark country winding road at night and you start hallucinating that a signpost pops up out of the corner of your view and you think it's a person or an animal or something. And I kind of see this theory underground thing floating around there, and I've seen some Zizek stuff, and I've seen some gosh, I feel bad now because Nick Land, right? I've seen some Nick Land stuff, and it's very. So I guess if I had to throw out a name, it would be, and I don't know if this is relevant at all. So you might have to give me a history lesson, but uh, Cantbot and uh, Logo Daedalus are two characters that I remember from 2016 who were saying like they for they were the first people who I heard of who were saying like we're serious philosophically inclined leftists in some way or another, or we've transcended the left right spectrum. I don't know, but somehow we're like structuralists, we're Deleuzians, we're Hegelians, we're German idealists, something like that, and we're supporting Trump on those grounds. So we're transcending this left right divide. We're transcending the hysterics of politics and what everyone thinks is going on the surface level. And yeah, I think Zizek was a big kind of mainstream figure who's able to say, well, I'm a Marxist and I can see the advantages of Trump. And now I think that's kind of had this degenerated stepchild with someone like Jackson Hinkle, who claims to be a Marxist and also everything else that he is. So it's like I see these little I don't know. I almost see like I feel like I'm looking at an ancient genealogy in the Bible, and there's like
Mm.
Adam and Seth and Noah, and then there's like a split in the genealogy, and there's these different tribes. So if you can kind of maybe give me your perspective on that, where you might fit into that picture, where some of these other characters fit.
So I did, and I'll just speak for just myself. I'm not an official representative of anything. I'm not even an official representative of myself, because this idea that I have of myself is, it's imminent. It's not out here in the world. The idea of me that belongs to you and the internet and everyone else isn't mine. I'm not the adjudicator. I'm not the arbiter of how I'm received. But all I can do is try to speak for myself. Um, and I mean, yeah, there was a lot of kind of like edgy, burnt out leftists at the time, 2015, 2016, and kind of moving forward. And at that time, I was still something of I would even say like a naive leftist. I think at that time I thought I was a Possadist. Like genuinely, I was like, I'm one of the only true Possadists in the world. So kind of like a post-ironic, post-care even person who, like, I still thought I was just committed to the left, and I didn't even have a proper idea of what the left is. And then over time, I started to realize a new situation for myself, and the idea of becoming active became a real possibility for me. And so I really had to like interrogate myself and ask myself, well, what do you believe in? And I was a dumbass worker, so I didn't really know much. And I just knew, well, I believe in some vague idea of emancipation and human flourishing. And I think that's still it. Like, I think I do methodologically maintain like this naive stance of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that I feel that I necessarily have to do what I'm doing because I want to take part in actualizing a better world. I reject all the solutions that have been kind of lofted before. There was a point in time when I was an enthusiastic anarchist. There was a point in time when I was an enthusiastic Marxist. And there was a point in time when I was kind of a just burnt out, disgruntled guy. But over the last few years, things have changed. Structures have emerged, or at least are beginning to emerge, for me to feel efficacious. And I feel like participating in Theory Underground, largely, that's most of what I do. And it's an educational framework for people like me, people like with whom I share some type of recognition, to challenge ourselves and say, well, I think I believe in emancipation. I think I believe in some type of human future. I do want something human to make it into the near future. But I don't know what that is, and I don't know what that means, and I don't believe there are any effective methods to like actualize world change currently. I do believe the left is dead. But I'm not here offering this is what's really happening. We are still currently frozen. So I think personally for me, I'm working to bring about structures that I believe might lead to the emergence of a movement that you could call left or the internet could call left. Sure, I'm okay with that because I think emancipation and structural thinking are kind of core of, or near the core of what I believe in. And I think many leftists share this idea of emancipation, and appreciate structural thinking. Coming from a Marxist background, I know there's a lot of people who don't do that, but I do think that matters too. I think we have to have like robust structural thinking, structural critique. So I don't know, to answer your question, I think it's all bullshit, and we might be spinning our wheels. But at least it's an opportunity for me to feel efficacious and to kind of like soothe my soul in the long dark night.
Yeah, I guess I am, I don't know if I'm more optimistic than you. I think the left is not dead, but the left is more alive than at any point in the universe.
Ooh, ooh.
And so I guess I think one of the maybe colloquial or surface level ways to distinguish myself is to say that I think there's a definition of the left that would say the left is about the working class. The left is about um, taking people who are trapped in some kind of exploitative system and changing that system so that they're not exploited anymore. And I guess I sort of I view technology and biology as fundamental axes of leftism. And I
Mm,
see the left as engaging with biology and technology, or we could just call it biotech, in
mm.
a dynamic, creative way. Whereas I see the right not as a super. I mean, I see the right as inherently reactionary. So the right wing
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is the aspect of human psychology which, when you start experimenting with biotech, they get uncomfortable and they slap you down. They say, "Hey, don't play with that. That's not, we that's the sacred eternal. It's always been this way. We don't mess around with that." Um, so I view that as kind of the fundamental dichotomy. Now,
Mm,
there are certain material limits on the amount of exploration you can do at any given time, although I'm
mm,
sympathetic, I'm increasingly sympathetic to the idea that the creative process, or what we kind of call science, although that's almost at this point an overused term and it's very confusing. So if I say, "Oh, I'm a scientist," okay, so what you do is you take orders from your boss to run experiments in a lab, or
yeah.
you do code that probably an AI is going to be able to do in a few years, where you do a bunch of simulations. And okay, you're not being super creative. In fact, someone who's doing poetry or something that's not like economically productive, they might be more creative than you. So, really thinking of science as a creative endeavor, where you're transgressing boundaries, you're being curious, you're exploring, you're being adventurous. All of that, I would say, um, has been decreasing for several hundred years in
Mm,
its in like the psychological ability of people to, like, if I want to discover something amazing in physics or chemistry or whatever, something groundbreaking, something paradigm shifting, it's going to be much harder to do today than it was in the past, because a lot of that hard work has already been done. And so it's almost like a fractal where we've done the big chunk of the fractal. Now we're just we're tediously, meticulously, pedantically like filling out the little details. Yeah. So riff on that.
I like that a lot. First of all, just recently, the other day, I came out publicly as a battalion. So, a lot of the people in the scene are Heideggerians or Zizekians or Lacanians or Levinasians or just simple Marxists or none of it at all. And the other day, I was having a conversation where I staked, I put the stake in the mud and I said, I am a battalion. And of course, this is sensational. Of course, it was rhetorical, but it also is largely true. So I appreciate when you're talking about pushing limits. Um, and kind of pushing material limits is something I think we should all be engaged in this idea of experimentation with biotechnology. There is something there. I recently criticized someone talking about Heidegger, where they wanted to do this kind of like postmodern neoliberal Heidegger. And I was like, no, I think we should take Heidegger and center the human. I mean, Heidegger obviously wanted to center his own very specific type of human. And I don't think we should go that far, but we don't have to decenter the human. And a lot of reactionaries want to take that and turn that into a sacred. I don't believe it's sacred. I just believe it's what we are. So why try to pick apart what we are when we don't even know what we are yet? We should try to augment it, try to celebrate it, try to enhance it and extend it. We shouldn't turn it into the sacred ground that we can't experiment and play with, because that's a different type of decentering the human subject. That says we don't honor our own agency and our own productivity. God got it right the first time. And obviously I reject that. So yeah, I maybe nothing is sacred, and maybe that's methodologically important.
I'm a Platonist, so I think God got it right the first time, but we're still figuring that out. So I think it's an
Okay.
unfolding process. I think if you, because I'm also a big fan of Schopenhauer, and the idea that reproduction begins with the will, not with like the material act is very. So when people talk about abortion, they say, well, a fetus is a living human being, and if you kill that fetus, you're actually murdering somebody. And I said, well, yeah, also, if two people are having a great first date and you mess that up, you're also killing somebody, because there's a chain of causality there of the will. And by the way, that's also true if you see a pretty girl, you get along with her, and you don't ask her out on a date, you're also killing an unborn fetus. It hasn't been, conceived yet or anything. But in terms of the will, there is conceptions are happening all the time, and it's our discipline, our dedication, our fanaticism, and our focus to follow through on that train of thought, take it to its logical conclusion, rather than stopping in anxiety, reaction, hesitation, and saying, well, I'm afraid that there might be a cost associated, there's a fear of failure, let's just stick with what we know. And so when I think of the sacred, I think of the sacred as an attractive or repulsive force. So the sacred creates boundaries, and it creates vectors of force. And oftentimes people use the sacred as a pen or a jail cell to keep everybody in. And I think there's a way of, I think if we can sacralize creativity, and we can say, sacredness is not something that we can contain or hold in a jail cell, but actually Plato's metaphor of the cave tells us, we have to get out of that enclosure, and we have to, the sacred is we're approaching reality through our expression of agency and creativity, and that means there has to be transgression. Like you have to understand that a part of your own psychology, there is a warden, and you have to struggle with that warden, and you have to continually move progressively toward the light. And the light is the sacred, essence that we're going for, but it's not something that it's not a perimeter that we stay within or stay outside of, but it's a source that we're trying to return to. So there is a essence within us that seeks the light, that is therefore, in terms of the will, consubstantial with that light. And it's the attraction between those two like forces that brings us in contact with the sacred, that gives us the flow state or the experience of eureka or the
Mm.
experience of discovery, adventure, excitement. That's contact with the sacred. That's not just sexuality in physical terms, but in terms of genius is referring to the genitals etymologically.
Mm.
So an act of genius is a sexual act. It's not a sexual act between male and female physically, but it's a sexual act between the our receptivity to creative forces and then a reciprocal pursuit of some kind of hidden, plutonian wealth that we're trying to uncover. We're trying to kind of dig these holes and escape from the subterranean realm and find that light. So I think there's room for the sacred. It just requires that you see that it's possible to have sacredness as a teleology rather than as a
Mm-hmm,
perimeter.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. I think I mean if I were gonna launch an argument against it, I would just say, yeah, sure, but all of that only matters because we are the beings for whom these things matter. And I would just kind of hand wave it away because I don't have any problems with it at all. And yeah, I do think I think there's a way to have like a robust, nuanced view of the world and our place in it. So I guess, yeah, I kind of care a lot less about metaphysics than maybe I should. Maybe I'm missing something with kind of bracketing that out. But yeah, that's great. And I mean, obviously, beauty and the numinous and all these things. And recently, I'm entertaining more and more Plato. Like I know being like as a younger edgy atheist guy, like our atheism, like the notion of the good just used to like gross me out. But as I'm getting older and I guess more refined, I'm warming up to it more and more. So yeah, I don't think Plato's done with history or the future.
The anti-metaphysical attitude, um and like so it's hard for me because I guess there's a perspective where you can say, okay, well, the good, that doesn't really mean anything, and so this
I
is
think it
just
does. Just to be clear, I do think it does.
I'm just kind of like I'm trying to formulate an anti-metaphysical argument by saying, well, you could say like a more specific instance would be to say, okay, there's this thing called the Bible and there's this thing called Christian
Mm.
metaphysics, but it's ultimately this self-referential thing. It's based on its own authority, and it's just justifying things because, well, it serves an existing structure. I had a conversation where uh, there's this term psychofauna. So it's like there's this animal that
Mm.
has its own existence, and we're just sort of feeding into it. And it's in this like Solomonic Faustian way. It's kind of exchanging alchemically this power to us for the power that we give to it. So there's this reciprocal exchange there, but it's like a fiat. It's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
it's not grounded in physical reality. It's just this kind of circular thing of, oh, well, the dollar means something because we all agree it does. Oh, Christian metaphysics means something because we all agree that we have this leap of faith, and so we just trust that it's all true. Platonism really, I believe, kind of does two things. In the first place, it acknowledges the fact that people have come up with these self-referential stories based on faith that are not necessarily true. And so we have to kind of take like a blank slate approach, and say, okay, before we just jump into the middle of one of those cycles, but is there anything that we can figure out about what is good or true or beautiful without reference to some pre-existing faith-based story? And when he says the good, then to me, there is, I guess, I don't know. Maybe I'm not a strict enough Platonist or rigorous enough in my philosophy. But I'm like, yeah, things are beautiful, things are good. Now, I'm also a big fan of Locke, and I think that we can decompose these complex ideas into simple ideas, and ultimately the good, true, beautiful are supposedly the simplest ideas that are possible, that everything is composed out of or mapped onto in this material world. That's the whole concept of you got the shadows from the cave and stuff. So, I don't think that there's like, and I've talked to people who say, "Oh, yeah, I'm a Platonist. I believe there's a perfect apple in the Platonic realm, and when I die, I'll
Space
go there and
triangles.
I'll eat the perfect apple." And it's like that's literally what a lot of Christians throughout history have believed that, and Muslims and so that when I
Hmm.
die,
Hmm.
there's going to be 72 of the most perfect, beautiful women, and so on. So there are these ideal forms. Um, I guess I'm also influenced by Hindu reincarnation in the sense that I
Mm.
think I think that there's I mean, I think the Buddha kind of got it right that if there is a realm of forms, then that realm is kind of formless. And if you want to go there, it's
Mm.
not going to look like it does here. So to the extent that we exist as humans at all, we are incarnated, we are formed, and we can try to kind of move up and down hierarchies, or we can permutate things. Um, and I like the concept of karma not as a concept of moralistic justice, but as a concept of magnetic attraction. That each action has its own, Rupert Sheldrake's
Sheldrake.
morphogenetic
Yep.
field. Every action attracts like actions, and so if you are, I mean, I guess this is just woo woo, silly, superstitious stuff, but law of attraction. It's like you do certain things, you think certain thoughts. I think that it comes to the will. It's like the will
Mm.
is obviously limited in, and I think of people kind of accuse me of being a little bit too stuck up or an aesthetic supremacist or someone who cares too much about the appearance of things. And it's like, well, why can't we just be harmonious and just accept things as they are? And to me, I feel that there is no neutral ground. There is no metaphysical centrism. There is no sense where you can just say, "Well,
Mm.
I just am. I'm sort of I'm floating," because necessarily you're hiding, and you're being a hypocrite in the sense that you're continuing to eat, you're continuing to breathe, you're
Mm.
continuing to
Mm.
express your will in these ways. So you're willing to express your will essentially in ways which are reactionary, in ways that
Yeah.
you just sort of react to your environment rather than saying, no, there is a certain telos that I'm working toward, um, and maybe there's some kind of faith in that, but at least I'm participating in that
Mm.
faith
Mm.
rather than being a passive recipient of, like, well, I don't have any telos or aesthetic sensibility because I'm just trying to get along with my environment and not rock the boat. You have just
Mm.
become an extension of someone else's body. You have just
Yeah. Yeah.
enslaved yourself. So, in terms of emancipation, I'm not in favor of, you know, there are some who would say the ultimate act of agency is to instantiate ugliness, but to me, that's just another form of reactionary oppositionalism. So
Sure.
being agentic is not going along with the crowd just to be harmonious, but it's also not and I'm probably more of a contrarian than most, but it's not just being a contrarian. It's as best as you are capable, which is going to be different for different people, but it's
Mm.
finding, you know, is there a telos that I can work toward? And given my current situation, where, given that that's point Z and I'm at point A, what is my point B at any given moment? That like procedural, um, step by step, moment by moment decision making. Um, that's what bacteria do. Like that's what
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
bacteria
Yeah.
see. Like, oh, there's some light in that direction, so I'll like wiggle my flagella to try to get over there.
I uh I like it a lot, and I actually just wrote a piece kind of problematizing this bacteriological thinking, and this kind of like rote mathematized arithmetic type of intelligence, and how we are humans, and how we have so much more, and how like I want to live in a world where we can indulge in this type of intelligence and maybe even agency, but we are very much trapped in a world that is rote, that is instrumentalized, that is there is light, let me move there. There is food, let me move there. Uh, I have to reproduce, let me carry out these actions to reproduce. I mean, that's the world we live in, and I do think most people um, have a deep yearning for something more, and I mean, I think sometimes I am probably too naive, but I do go back to this like very rose tinted, very Rousseauian, like people are basically good. And I think part of being basically good is this shared lack, this shared yearning, the shared lust and longing for and drive for more. And social technologies and political technologies have kind of sprung up in this situation, this horrible, scary, dark whirlwind that we live in, and we're all fooling ourselves. We're all trying to lie to ourselves and each other by pretending that we're not afraid and we're not confused. And that's not to say everyone is just afraid and just confused, but I think for me that's what like the left was. It was a protective thing. I was trying to not be duped. I was trying to say I have figured it out. I can see through the bullshit, and I know and I still think I can see through the bullshit, and I know. But what I also bring now is the fact that I only know my lack. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have a plan or a solution. I'm gonna fail, and I think like necessarily I will fail, but I want my children and their children to live in a world where they might have the opportunity to approach humanness as such. And I think that is predicated on people right now kind of being dedicated to bringing about conditions. But this is all bullshit. This is all just like, this is a line to comfort myself, because I don't want to fail. I wish I could be successful. I want to actualize. And I believe that's impossible.
I think
Yeah.
we're almost approaching God from two completely different perspectives, and
Yeah, I like
and
that.
I acknowledge that this is baked into the cake instinctually. There's a
Mm.
tension between the procedurally generated reactive way of life, which itself can, be a flow. I mean, it could be a wonderful thing to just
Mm-hmm.
have absolute certainty about the thing I'm going to do, because I'm not even thinking it. I've totally lost my wits. I've lost my consciousness, and I'm either enjoying or I'm in pain, but there's no suffering. There's no knowledge of
Yep.
good and evil to
Yep. Yep.
introduce. There's no sin, because there's not even
Mm.
a concept of, oh, I regret this because I could have done this. I could. No, it's like, well, he did this, so I did that, and then it just
Mm.
happened. That almost like psychopathic way of living is it's kind of stress free. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a
Yep.
day in the beach, and you're looking up at the clouds and the sunset, and the dolphins are jumping in the water, and it's kind of like a happy place. Um, Even I think people watch horror movies to access this. They want
Mm.
to be terrorized, because when you enter a state of terror, you enter a kind of flow state where you're no longer consciously making decisions. You're just
Mm-hmm.
reacting. You're just fight or flight. And this is
Mm-hmm.
it gives people stress relief, because when we're stressed, when we're anxious, we're not afraid. We're actually self-punishing for
Mm-hmm.
mistakes that we haven't even made yet. So when you said, I
Yeah.
know I'm going to fail, I'm not just going to fail myself, I'm going to fail my children and my children's children. That is the weight of a reactive self-punishment that has been imposed on you. It's been programmed in your brain
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
these superegoic moralizations. And you think, okay, good person self punishes, activate self punishment. And so you are whipping yourself on the back, and you're
Yes.
doing all these uncomfortable things because you're trying to be a good person. The fact that we even have that capacity to try to anticipate future
Mm.
events, heaven and hell, and it's
Mm.
constantly, again, terror isn't the right word, because we're a lot of times we confuse pain with suffering. Um, it's not a state of terror, it's a state of guilt and shame and self-punishment and
Mm.
devaluation. It
Mm.
has to do with our reflective image of ourselves. If we didn't have these mirrors to hold ourselves up against, I mean, there are perfectly ugly men who are full of confidence and successful with women, because they just never take the time to say, like, yeah, I'm kind of ugly, like, no one would really love me. They just go up and they just ask the girl out. And you know what? Most
Mm.
women,
Mm.
they have a different sort of calculation than men, and so
Mm.
they value confidence highly, and so you can make your way with that. But there's like a self. I mean, it is a form of self enslavement, and it's a
Mm.
perfect social technology, because
Mm-hmm.
you need people to, you need people to not have very much agency if you want to coordinate actions. If
For sure.
and I'll cut myself off there, because I know you've had some things to say.
Um, First, I do feel very called out by your framing of just do the damn thing. Get out of your own way, um, and be the confident person who is boldly going ahead. I guess that has some resonance on a personal level, which is fun, and I'll probably think about that for the rest of the day. Um, but that's a good thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I will ever be able to escape the self-flagellation. I know it's a hindrance. It very likely will get in my own way and kind of like be the cause of the failure itself. So like my own actions are prefiguring my own failure. This ficti Nance type thing. But I think that's why I really latched on to the idea of like what we're calling now a nascent milieu or a pseudo milieu, relying on others, being in a framework of other trustworthy, respectable people to help call me out on my bullshit, to kind of show me when my unconscious is showing, and to fill in the gaps, because I'm not good at it. I don't know what I'm good at, but I'm here. So I want to be involved in a project and engage productively. I can't do that on my own. I know I'm too whatever to be that. So I think, well, if I can go and kind of develop a milieu, and I know some people have a problem with that word, and maybe we are still just in a scene and kind of simulating being the ones who do things, but at least we're trying to get outside of it. And to be able to rely on others to cover for my lack, not cover for my lack, but make up for my lack, I think is a necessary step. And I know there are a lot of people who think they can do it in isolation, and I disagree. And I also wonder, that's very Heideggerian, with this, like all you're saying is kind of this anxiety and this state of mind and this guilt, and even kind of this retroversion, like this telos. We're moving into this telos, but we also have to be aware of the ripples that our projection is sending back through time to kind of color and condition and even determine the choices we're making today, because we have this idea of a shining city on a hill off in the future. Uh, I don't know how much Heidegger you've read, but I like Heidegger, but I also have huge problems with Heidegger. But I think that's kind of essential too, and I like your approach.
I've read zero Heidegger, but
Really.
yeah. I mean, I've read less than 1% of everything
Yeah.
that is like the necessary, like you must read this before you're allowed to speak.
Reject that. That's bullshit. Stand up and speak now.
Okay, I'm gonna defend it. I'm actually gonna defend. So first I called you out, and now I'm gonna actually defend the super ego, and I'm gonna defend reading all. I'm not gonna defend reading Heidegger. I'm sorry, but I will defend reading Plato.
Okay.
And my point here, and the thing that I ended on, where before I cut myself off, was that it's necessary that we feel guilt and shame in order to coordinate our actions without the use of physical violence. It's the only mechanism that we have.
Yeah, yep.
And we do have social needs. And so even if you're like, well, you know what? I'm convinced I'm going to be this psychopathic, reactive animal beast man. I got a ticket right now. I'm going to the beach. I'm going to watch the dolphins. If I have a problem with somebody and I feel like murdering them, I'll just murder them. If I want to have sex with somebody and they don't want to have sex, I'll just have sex with them anyway. These sorts of ways of being, they're not so like taken in within there. Like we talked about the Bible as a metaphysical system that's self-referential. Within the self-referential metaphysics of psychopathy, all of that is kind of logical, and it's actually self-sustaining. The point where that system breaks down and has internal contradictions is because we actually do have like deep-seated needs to harmonize, socialize, cuddle, hug. We actually, most people don't want to be total psychopaths all the time. And so the trick here, I guess, is recognizing that we have contradictory instincts that are fundamentally irreconcilable, but they're going to exist in tension. So if they're going to exist in tension, can we figure out, like, I don't want to say metaphysics, but can we figure out a telos that this tension becomes a productive tension, just like, when you look at the axle on the spokes of the train wheels as they're, going back and forth, it's moving the train forward, right? So what is this productive tension? What is that telos? And when you say milieu and you say, is that a bad word? What is the word? I would say at the most basic level, it's a social connection. It's a relationship. So we need to have relationships, or most people need to have relationships. And so the types of relationships we have, I've come to believe this. So I went through a period of my life I called radical friendship extremism, where I said my telos is just making friends with people, and all ideology and everything else that gets thrown to the side. It's people first, and then you put you form your plans later. So hey, I like you, you like me. Let's make a plan. Let's form a commune. Let's live together. Let's do all this stuff. Let's start a business. And what I felt that I discovered through that, now I don't think any of that is wrong, but what I felt I discovered was that you should give everybody a bit more credit in their ability to form friendships, and not see you shouldn't have this idea in your head that like there's a few soulmates, or maybe even one perfect soulmate, this platonic form of the friend, that I have to go out in the world of billions of people and I have to hunt this person down and find them. And they have to have the right music taste, or whatever that is. There has to be some almost, it's easier to conceptualize this in a romantic context, but there is some kind of level of attraction in a platonic context, right? So there is that there's that like friendship first perspective, but I think it doesn't give people enough credit in that if you have a common telos, even if it's one that you didn't choose, like survive, like we got to survive,
Mm-hmm.
people will form friendships, unlikely friendships. Actually, animals do this. They form interspecies friendships. You'll get a dog and a deer and a rabbit and a chimpanzee. And if they're put in the right conditions, the right environment, they will become friends. Now, there's no Darwinian evolutionary genetic cooperation, selfish gene altruism going on, but that's hardwired into animals and it's hardwired into us. So if we actually put the telos first and we say, okay, I'm working toward a goal, I want to work toward this goal with other people, then it's a lot easier to develop friendships around that. So this is kind of the nasty side of that is political tribalism, disputes over I like this kind of music, you don't, and so you're bullying people, social exclusion, and all of that's really nasty and violent. So wouldn't it be nice if we could have some kind of universal telos that we could all work toward? Well, it's really hard for us to agree on what that would be. That is presumably the job of religion or philosophy or political ideology. And so it's something we kind of have to think about. We kind of, and I would say this was like an aggressive naivete on my part. This was like me saying, I want to leave the world of ideology and tribalism behind, and I want to become this blank slate person who can get along with anybody. And I just started to feel that relationships aren't formed because I'm born with a certain soul of a certain puzzle piece shape, and you have the same puzzle, and we just lock together so well. It's that people change and adapt to situations as they arise. And this is why there have been studies in Germany when Second World War, cities were getting bombed, and you had people who were clinically depressed, neurotic, anxious, shut-ins, in bed all day, couldn't hold down a job, didn't take care of themselves, didn't shower, didn't bathe. And then the bombs start dropping. And they're like, hey, grab that wheelbarrow and start moving these rocks. There's someone trapped under here. And it's like people just snapped into they just fit into that situation. When people are needed, when people are demanded, when there's exigence, when it's like, I need you and you need me and we need to work together. And once you've got that down, then that's where that super egoic guilt and shame of, oh, am I good enough? Maybe I can never be good enough. When it is given a form, then all that tension actually creates a powerful chemical reaction and things happen. And it's no longer this brewing and stewing that happens when it's like, well, I know I'm a bad person, but I don't even know why I'm a bad person. I just know I am a bad person. This is such a frustrating place to be that so many people find themselves because they don't have someone telling them like, hey, if you don't go out and hunt those buffalo or something, like our children are going to starve and die. Like, and that's just something that has been provided for us either by the conditions of survival or the religious structures of agriculture, and all those sorts of things. So we're all caught up in this maelstrom where all the authority structures have been put under question because, like, the biotech is just going wild, and it's like, all right, well, clearly those religious structures that claim to have the answer to everything, well, there's a few unanswered questions here. Do we even really know anything? If one part of this is the problem when you say infallible Bible, because then if you disprove one teensy tiny little part of it, we got to throw the whole thing out. Whereas if, this is kind of the advantage of the myth of science, or science TM or whatever, is, we're able to be more, it's almost like those sort of religions. Science is prophetic. Instead of having a holy text that we all adhere to, if there's some prophet from the wilderness who comes in and says, you guys are wrong about all this, I got the new data, it's basically God spoke to me. Science is able to say, you know what, you are a prophet, we're going to listen to you, we're going to adjust. So
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that ideal form of science. I think that is the spirit of science, and I think science and the humanities have been sundered, and I think that we have to work to intentionally bring them back together. But I also think that like the science of today is very much just a kind of instrumental ideology to justify building better bombs, coming up with better marketing research strategies, coming up with better social control technologies. And I think it's a shame because, yeah, the spirit of wonder, the spirit of discovery, the spirit of truth, again, that goes back to this kind of shared lack that we all have. Maybe we're not puzzle pieces designed for one another, although I do have a lot of thoughts on soulmates, but we don't have to get into them now because I should write a paper about it. Actually, I'm understanding, but I do think we are puzzle pieces, and it's the world, or it's the truth, or it's the universal, or whatever that kind of fits into our little weird squiggly bit. And that's a silly framing, but I think it's true. Like I think we are driven to transcend ourselves. We are driven to extend ourselves. We are driven to get our chocolate in the peanut butter of the world around us, and that includes all the others. And it's a fucking shame what they've done to science, because it's no longer about the spirit of wonder, the spirit of discovery, the spirit of the universal. It is about killing children in Yemen right now. That's what science is doing right now, and it's a shame.
I
Yeah.
have a contrarian take for that, which is that
Okay.
science has always been about killing children
Ooh.
in
Okay.
Yemen. And
Okay.
and so when we talk about that like, so going back to this original idea of relationships are formed because of emergencies and necessities, and life or death. And one way to provide that is through simple survival. So it's man against nature. And so in a man against nature situation, this is perfect communism. This is tribal primitive Marxism where everything's egalitarian. If someone's acting like a psychopath, you you slap them around and you get back to the duty of survival, because look, we don't have time for, you think you're the big man and you're going to lord over. You're going to tell us we're going to go attack some other tribe and we're going to start forging weapons and developing military technology. We don't have time for that. That's not within our narrow framework of what we need right now to survive. Now, the process of transformation between those egalitarian societies toward hierarchical, patriarchal, war-making societies, that's kind of a mysterious thing. That's kind of an interesting thing, and it's also sort of. I think some of it does have to do, again, situationally with, maybe there are certain ecologies that lend themselves or demand a more egalitarian form of society, whereas other ecologies are more like, our form of resource acquisition or filling our mouths is much more warlike, because we're not we're not dealing with like chickens and goats and crops or whatever, that looks like. We're dealing with woolly mammoths or something. We're dealing with prey animals that are actually larger than us, and on a one-to-one basis can very easily kill us. So there is that could be a potential source. One of the ways to think about this is people who live in river valleys, much more likely to form an egalitarian model. People who live at high elevations, high altitudes, or on a kind of semi-arid kind of steppe savanna type thing. I'm thinking of the Maasai tribe, the lion hunters, right? So this might be an explanation for why those different cultures form, or why some of them are maintained, or why they return. But ultimately we get to this point where these patriarchal war-making societies just start dominating everybody else, linguistically, culturally. They start creating class hierarchies and aristocracies, and they say, you know what, we're just going to transplant ourselves on top of your pre-existing society. No, we're not going to do any work. We're not going to participate
Mm-hmm.
in resource acquisition. We're farming you, like we're
Yeah, yeah.
domesticating you. You're our farm animals. So that I see as completely consubstantial with science, that the
Mm.
egalitarian mode of society has a concept of the sacred as we have to abide by the things that we know we have to do to survive, and you can't go outside of that. And these war machine, to kind of use a term from Deleuze, this war machine
Mm-hmm.
is saying we're not just going to violate like some pedantic aspect of the sacred. We're gonna blow up society. We're terrorists. We're Odysseus, Conan the Barbarian, whatever that is. At least mythologically, I mean, people can kind of dispute, did that happen archaeologically? Did like the mythic idea of the Dorian invasion or whatever, is that a hoax? Okay, assume it is a hoax. At least
Mm-hmm.
psychologically, the intention is to kind of terrorize people and say, like,
Mm-hmm.
we could do this to you. In fact, we're the descendants of the people who already did it to you, and we're happy to do it again. And that's how the Spartans keep the Helots in line. So I think that the origins of science and like breaking the sacred, it is a violent act against the survivalist egalitarianism that precedes it. And so it's
Mm.
not a contradiction that kids in Yemen are being bombed by science. It is a continuation of
Mm.
a tradition that goes back to the origins of science. And I would say that actually it's not possible to have science without first, at least mythologically, saying, like, I'm going to, rape Mother Earth, basically.
Yeah.
It's a predatory instinct. We've refined it, and we've introduced all sort of sacrality and civility in the Royal Society, and you put on your spectacles and you wear your tweed jacket and stuff. So we've formalized all of that to hide the violence of science. But yeah, I guess I would say I don't think science
Mm.
has become perverted and become violent. I think it's always been violent, but we've become very good at hiding that.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think the distinction I make is maybe in the intentionality. So I think absolutely every like uh, metabolism, like we are, again going back to my batai, like we are the solar anus. We are like all we do is metabolize. We take resources and convert them into output. It can be waste, but waste has some connotations I'm not necessarily comfortable with. So for now, we'll say output. So we take resources, we convert them into output. So there is like something fundamental about the animal, much less the human, where violence is necessary, deconstruction is necessary, metabolism conversion is necessary. And I think the distinction I make is just, okay, well, yeah, that's all true. And I accept all of it. But I do have this pull toward the good. I do see this shiny space triangle that's telling me I can be better than I currently am. And I think that's the project of humans, is to use our intentionality to ensure that necessary violence isn't harmful violence. And the word violence has connotations I'm not necessarily comfortable with either, but it is true that destruction, deconstruction, force, change, recoding, overcoding, like all these things are already necessary. Like we couldn't have the human subjective experience were it not for this violence. So absolutely, I want to have principled people controlling the projection of where this is taking us. And it feels like right now it's on autopilot, and it's the paperclip maximizer, and it's just this unending churn of waste, and that includes death, genocide, rape, human tragedies. And I want to say, well, maybe we need some naive, bleeding heart, you know, just enthusiastic, loving people to say we can do better, we must do better, because we have that power, we have subjectivity, we have the ability to project, we have the ability to see the repercussions of our actions, and we can recognize, oh, it's actually fucked up when we do these things to cause harm to other people and other living beings. And so, like, I want a deep ecology predicated on responsible humanity. And but yeah, I think
I'll say something anti-human to end on, which is that when you say that humans generate waste, we have to consider the possibility that the waste being generated is other humans. So I think there's two ways to reduce waste. One of that is with direct physical violence. The other way is, what I would just say is sort of a liberal self-selection decline of saying, you know what, we are going to deconstruct all of the family values, metaphysics. That's like you said, putting us on autopilot for filling up the world with as many people as possible, which is not ecologically sustainable, or even at the end of the day, depending on what we mean by economy, is not even, I mean, we could say it's growing the GDP, it's growing the economy, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to pick at that, but I wish I had more time to talk to you. I'd really actually like to do a follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do also want to give you the last word to, final thoughts, and if there's anyone you want to promote or shout out, go ahead.
Yeah, first, thank you. This was interesting for me. I like to pretend that I am a non-entity, a non-factor. I like to be just an irrelevant person, shouting into the wind, and my words and actions have no consequences. And so I don't love making appearances and being the one who is speaking. I much prefer to be hiding in a corner somewhere, observing and scribbling my thoughts in a journal that may or may not make it to publication at some point in time. But I did enjoy this, and thank you very much for bringing me on. I definitely would love to do a follow-up. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, some synergies, and also some contradictions that would probably be generative if we allowed them to unfold. As far as promotion, Theory Underground is the project. I think I'm enthusiastically kind of committed to developing a milieu or a structure that exists outside of myself, that ultimately will hopefully accelerate me in my quest for efficacy in the world. Check out Dave, Theory Underground, Substack, YouTube, all those places. My shit, and everyone else who's involved in our budding milieu.
All right, beautiful, Nance. Thank you for coming on. Hopefully, we will speak again soon.
Heck yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, guys. It was a good one. If you if you want to give me some capitalist success, like, comment, restack, all those good things. If you want to form a subjective human bleeding heart connection with me, write me some love letters in the comments section. Until next time, that is all we have for today. Appreciate your time and attention. Goodbye.